Well, look, I'm not going to waste all the time I'm in. I'm going to talk about his running mate. His running mate, Elon Musk. Seriously. Where is Senator Vance after he got asked the simplest question in the world at the debate? Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? And after 2 weeks, he finally said, no, he didn't. That's where he's been spending his time. But that's it. So, look, Elon's on that stage, jumping around, skipping like a dipshit on these things. You know it.
Hi, I'm Ana Marie Cox. This is 90 Days with Ana Marie Cox. We've been counting on the days to the election, and there are 12 days until the election. Right? This is a show where we talk to smart people about this historic, crazy-making, mind-melting election. Today's smart person is Greg Pak. He is a writer and filmmaker. You might recognize him from the movie Robot Stories and from comics such as Planet Hulk. He has been volunteering and involved in politics for, we figured it out as we were talking, 40 years.
4 decades.
4 decades.
Crazy. It's a little wild. Yeah, we've actually been on this planet that long.
So this begs the question, with all that background, all that experience, when you look at the election today, what is at the top of your mind? What is drawing, what do you think we should be talking about, and what are you thinking about?
Oh, well, getting out the vote. It's everything about getting out the vote right now. I mean, that's everything, right? I mean, first off, just to lay the groundwork, we have to win this election. We're up against authoritarian, racist, bigoted, sexist, homophobic, transphobic fascism, and a blatant racism, the likes of which I've never seen. Just everything just said out loud. Glamorizing Nazis, platforming Nazis. It is, and the ramifications of what a Trump victory would mean would be devastating for millions on every level. It would wreck us in so many different ways. I'm a pretty big lefty, and I'm furious with the Harris campaign for dropping the ball on multiple issues. At the same time, I know that we have to defeat Trump, and I'm 100% committed to, doing what I always do and hustling to try to, mobilize folks and get out the vote. It is the from years of doing this, like so many people say, the polls don't matter. Don't pay attention to the polls. I mean, it's hard not to, but they are they're virtually irrelevant at this point in time. It's a tied race, and all of the critical swing states are incredibly close. None of the polls are going to tell us who's actually ahead right now, and our job is just to get as many folks to the polls as possible. That's how we win. That's how we always win.
It is a balancing act right now, because I think it's impossible to not look at the polls. Who's not looking at the polls? If you care, if your team is playing, you want to know, right? But then I think the transition that we've talked about it on the show is if we're going to use the team metaphor, going to use the sports metaphor, you're not just watching the game, you're on a team. You got to play your position. You got to do your part. And that sounds so corny. And I think sometimes, especially for people who have trouble identifying with a party, leftists who maybe feel a little abandoned and silenced by the Democratic Party.
Yes, putting it mildly sometimes.
I'm just using some general language.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I hear you.
It is tough to get in the mindset or want to be in the mindset of there's still a position to play.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, the way the way I think about
I've got my coach t-shirt on, so maybe it's just I can't avoid it.
Thankfully he's out there saying some things. You know what I mean? Like the way he recently came out with a strong statement supporting trans kids and trans people, which various Democratic candidates have. I mean, no Democratic candidate has done adequately, and several Senate candidates have completely dropped the ball, and in fact bought into right-wing talking points on that, which is unconscionable, if you ask me, and also a losing position. Like anti-trans goons, creeps lose elections. I mean, that happens all the time. So buying into their rhetoric that's a sucker's move, as well as morally wrong. So that's a digression. But thank you, Waltz, for
That's not a digression.
for pander. Please, I am the base. Please pander to me. Please pander to me. You know what I mean?
I think if we go back to the beloved sports metaphor, I'm also going to go see TCU play this weekend. So I'm in a football headspace. I think because he's a coach, maybe he remembers that there's a full team that's not just like the quarterback. It's not just, it's not just the flashy like offense. He's a defensive coordinator, right? And that's an
totally
unsexy role. But he's like, we got to get everybody. Like, we got to get the trans people. We got to get trans people. We can't leave anyone behind. We got to get everybody on the field.
And that's not, and the Democratic Party, has not been doing that. I mean, look at the incredible wave of excitement that they got when Harris took over. I was very concerned when Biden was being pushed to drop out, because the main people pushing to drop out seemed to be a bunch of sorry centrists, quote unquote centrists, who wanted to push in, some miserable moderate by default, and kick the base, to the curb. And the fact that Biden dropped out and then immediately endorsed Harris meant that they weren't going to try to frickin' put Gavin Newsom in there. You know what I mean? Because that was literally being floated by people, which would have been catastrophic. And then for a long time, or for what seemed like a good solid, chunk of time, Harris was saying the right things, doing the right things, and putting creeps and weirdos on the defensive. And Waltz carried that vibe beautifully. I mean, I was so much rooting for him to get picked, and when he was picked, it was like, we got something going. We do still have something going, but we need to keep motivating that base and getting folks out. I mean, I am not responsible for the Democratic Party. You know what I'm saying? Like, no one of us, and this is kind of the way I think about this, is that no one of us can influence what the campaign is doing. You know what I mean? That's up to them. But we can speak to the communities we're part of, support the communities we're part of, and do what we can. Each one of us has one vote, and just using that vote is enormous. But we also have our own spheres of influence, and no matter how small you think your sphere of influence is, it's influential. And by actually encouraging folks to vote, by actually providing those links to and encouraging and giving folks sharing with folks whatever resources you've come across or ways to help get out the vote that you can find, or influence politicians the way you can find, that that's more than most people do, and it will have an impact. We do talk about the fact that it's become a cliche that every vote counts. It's absolutely true.
Cliches exist for a reason. I should add, the reason why you came on my radar is we follow each other on Blue Sky, and I saw all of the work that you're doing. I mean, originally I saw the work you're doing to promote other comic book artists, including like underrepresented comic book artists like trans people and people of color, right? But you have been like just putting out resources, and especially appealing to Asian American voters. And social media isn't everything. Let's put it out there. Social media is not everything. But one of the things I noticed about what you're doing is getting people to look. past
Yeah.
social media.
And to do stuff, you know what I mean? Like, I like everybody, I like complaining because there's a lot to complain about. And I complain, but if I try to pair that critique and that complaint with action.
I think it's safe to say that the two biggest things in your life for 40 years have probably been comic books and politics. Is that
Storytelling?
accurate?
I would say
Storytelling.
Yeah,
Okay.
I because I came up through film school. So I grew up. I'm Asian American. I'm biracial. My father's Korean. My mom was white. Grew up in Texas. Had a great childhood. Love my friends. Still in touch with tons of friends from college. I mean from grade school and high school and etc. But I grew up in Texas in the 70s and 80s and absolutely had plenty of racist experiences and grew up hyper aware of the fact that I was not always safe, and that being able to tell my story or communicate with people and tell a story was a big part of trying to secure some degree of safety. I mean, you hear about comedians talking about that a lot. You can tell a joke, you can diffuse aggression and bullying. And storytelling, I think, was that for me. Not that this was all conscious, but I was a kid who drew. I was a kid who wrote short stories. I was a kid who did theater. Did journalism in high school and all these. I did all of this different stuff. Always thought I was going to be a writer. Ray Bradbury was my hero. But eventually I studied political. And I will say also that the same things that drove me to storytelling, I think, are similar to the things that drove me to politics. You know what I mean? It's a similar thing of like, if we can just, it's a very optimistic view of politics that this is a way to bring people together or to defuse conflicts between people. You know what I mean? As opposed to a way to stomp other people in the ground in order to acquire power yourself, which is the way a lot of people use politics. But sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to say, like, there's a lot of stomping. I mean, you did Hulk comics, so
yes. Well, that's because I'm very, very angry.
Yeah,
I'm angry all the time. No, yeah. So those twin things drove me, and I studied political science as an undergrad, and then I came back home to Texas to work for Ann Richards. Worked on her campaign. We won! Hooray! Worked in her Office of Education Policy after that. And then I got a scholarship to go to England. And when I was there, I was studying history, ostensibly to become a better politician, or a more political person. But while I was there, I got the chance finally to get involved with a student filmmaking group. And all the lights went on. It's like, this is what I need to be doing. I came back and went to NYU for grad film. Studied film and became an independent filmmaker. And then after making this movie Robot Stories, I moved sideways into comics, which is sort of going back to my roots.
And we've been talking on this show a little bit about courage and bravery as a way of thinking about our role in this election rather than hope. And talk about storytelling.
Yeah, well, I think about the word fortitude a lot. Growing up growing up in the 80s, we spent a lot of years losing all the time. And I think it's important to realize that and understand that in electoral politics in particular, you're going to lose a lot. And but there's a reason we're doing it, and we got to keep going, and we have to have the never give up. Never give up, never surrender.
Well, that's okay. That's a Galaxy Quest reference. Never give up, never surrender. It's Galaxy Quest. And
exactly.
Emily Atkin was on this show, and she's the one who brought up fighting Thanos when I asked her about climate change. And how people are heroes. Heroes are heroes not because they win.
Well, it's also, you're not, I try not to talk about bravery. Just because I don't think that people are brave. You know what I mean? Like I try not to. This is also like a therapy thing, right? It's like we are not like calling ourselves good or calling ourselves brave or calling ourselves bad or calling ourselves cowardly is not really that helpful. You know what I mean? Because we are not all like we are not fully the good or bad qualities we assign to ourselves, and that's a way for someone prone to anxiety. Ding, ding, ding. That's an important thing. Like, we are not like moral perfectionism is not the goal here. You know what I mean? Like, we none of it. We are human, therefore we are imperfect, and we're going to screw things up, and we're going to fail sometimes. But the thing I mean, so instead of saying be brave, instead I say, I would just say, it's not about embodying equality. It's about just doing stuff. You know what I mean? It's just you can be terrified and still do a thing. You know what I mean? You can be nervous about it and still do a thing, And so like, you don't have to be fearless. You just have to do it, like find the partners and find the support and do it.
And I should take ownership. I inserted the word brave in there. And Emily talked more about courage, which I think is an interesting distinction and kind of gets to what you're talking about. Because courage is something that you show courage. I don't know if courage is like you need to say I'm innately courageous, right? Like, courage is a thing that you act, right?
Yeah. There's a great, and I'm going to misremember it, but my friend G. Willow Wilson, who wrote so many of those Ms. Marvel comics, is oh my gosh, she's become famous for a line which is incredibly impactful, and it's something along the lines of, "Good is not a thing you are; it's a thing you do." So and I think that's I think that's the best way to think about it. Also, because it's so easy for us to, I don't know, to throw each other away and dismiss even ourselves. That if we can't, if we're not perfect, then we're not valuable, and that's absolutely not true. Like, every moment we've got another chance to do the right thing and to help out. And so, I mean, so what I try to push, and I don't articulate all of this, you know what I mean, but I just try to throw out opportunities to do things, because the big thing that I wrote a whole piece after Biden's catastrophic debate. I wrote a thing and posted it on my gregpak.net site, which said, "There's always something you can do. There's always something we can do. No matter how desperate things are, no matter how bad it seems, there literally is always something we can do." And I posted actually a little picture I'd taken. I've got it here somewhere on my desk, but I can't find it right now to hold it up. But it was a little homemade button I'd made using like a name tag thing with Mondale's quote from his concession speech in 1984. Because I remember how crushing that was at the time when Mondale lost in 1984. 40 years ago. And I'm looking it up here right now to see if I can. The quote I remembered was, "Let us continue to strive for a just America." I think the quote is actually a little different. We didn't have the internet back then, so I was just remembering from seeing it live on TV. But I made myself this little thing, and I wore it to school the next morning because I was such a, I was as earnest and nerdy then as I am now. So that's what I did at the age of 16 or whatever. But that has stuck with me. This idea that there's always something we can do. And sometimes it's electoral politics. Sometimes it's looking up your local food bank. Sometimes it is getting involved with a mutual aid society or a free store in your neighborhood, donating to abortion funds. And sometimes it's signing up to send postcards. Or right now you can sign up with Vote Forward still to send letters. You know what I mean? There's a whole bunch of things you can do there's always something you can do.
And to me, I think maybe when I say science fiction and politics are inextricable, I want to add mental health. Maybe what I actually mean is storytelling, politics, and mental health, right? Wherever you get your stories can be an important part of how you function in politics and how your brain functions. Because I think what stories tell us is that the opposite of hopelessness isn't hope, it's action.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people draw. I mean, there's a thing online where people will say, watch another movie or read another book, because people often will like refer to to Star Wars, like the whole resistance thing came from the Star Wars movie. You know what I mean? And so like some of this becomes a cliche. But at the same time, yes, we do draw inspiration from whatever stories we hear. And so if folks are getting inspiration from pop culture, that's great. I mean, but I think the connection to mental health is real. Like I went to so again, Gen X. You know what I'm saying? It's like whatever. I'm a crunchy enough lib that I've always been, since whatever, in the last however many years, I've always been very open to uh, mental health care and all that kind of stuff. But I was always like, yeah, I don't really need that. Sure, I'm anxious, but that's just the way I am. I get stuff done and it's fine. But at the height of anti-Asian violence in 2021, I finally was like, you know what? All these little things I've got I need a little more help. And I went to therapy for the first time in 2021 in my 50s. And thank God I did. You know what I mean? Like I needed it. And I highly encourage folks to do that. But there are there are a few things that I think I've always known and always sort of lived by, but never was kind enough to apply them to myself about accepting imperfection. You know what I'm saying? And accepting the fact that we can't change everything, and yet we strive to do what we can. I when I was a kid, the Serenity Prayer made me angry because I thought it was giving up. You know what I mean? Which is, and now I'm like, oh yeah, that Serenity Prayer makes a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense because it is enjoining you to do what you can. You know what I mean? To change what you can. But it is also acknowledging the fact that there are things that we cannot change. And so when it says to accept that and know the difference, it doesn't mean accept it like just shrug. You know what I mean? It doesn't say that you're not still fighting and trying to find ways to make things better, but it is also saying that it's not your own moral failing, and you know what I mean?
The courage to do what I can.
Yeah. And what I can is not a cop out either. You know what I mean? Like what I can is more than most of us do. Do you know what I'm saying? Like we actually can do things, in the sense that like if you are stressed about this election, there is a lot you actually can do. That's not that hard. I mean, if you are, just to really on a really practical level, campaigns really want folks to phone bank. And it's easy to do that. Like you can sign up right now. You can go to mobilize.us and find a campaign that you're interested in, that you care about, and sign up. And tonight you could be phone banking. They'll train you in like half an hour, and they've got like bright and funny people who help you, who train you with a bunch of other people. And you could be phone banking just on your computer without anybody having your home phone number or anything. It's really easy. But phone banking is intimidating for a lot of people. You know what I mean? To actually talk to somebody. You've got a script. It's fine. It works. You know what I mean? Even I, who will talk all day, get a little anxious before I start phone banking. You know what I mean? But so it's not necessarily for everybody. But if you don't want to phone bank, you can text bank. And if you're, like the way I talk about text banking, if you're goofing around on social media, you are already doing everything you need to do in order to text bank. If you can type, if you can post, you can tweet, you can text bank. It's easy and it's fun. I mean, if you can play a video game, you can text bank.
And I want to put a plug in for what you can, the idea of can, and also self-forgiveness, which is the courage to do what you can. Can is what you can do, right? And you're right, and we all can do something, but sometimes can. Yesterday, I literally was lying on the floor in a fetal position. I'm completely serious. Like right here under my desk. I mean, I had a conversation that was so tough that I just was like, this is what I can do right now.
That is, it is. It can be brutal. You know what I mean? Like this. And also we are all traumatized. Like our country pretends like the pandemic never happened. You know what I mean? It pretends like the January 6th never happened. You know what I mean? Like we have suffered catastrophic events, unprecedented in our lifetimes, just in the last few years. You know what I mean? So we're all walking around jacked up. You know what I mean? Like they talk about like people are worse drivers, and more people are like we've got higher levels of car accidents and pedestrian deaths. You know what I mean? And I think that's all. These things are linked. You know what I mean? Like we're messed up. And so I'm with you. Afford yourself that forgiveness.
Because if you have to get on the floor in a fetal position, that does mean that you might be able to get up later.
Yeah, I'm at the risk of too much. This is a little affirmation I made for myself. I literally like wrote this out and painted it. Stop judging yourself by the rigged standards of the most bad faith and imaginary critic in your head, with a little heart on it. But like this, like this kind of, it is very easy for us, for depending on who you are and how you grew up, to feel so bad about the world and ourselves that we are, that we're paralyzed. And sometimes we just need to, take care of ourselves, and that's really important. At the same time, it's not like we can afford ourselves forgiveness. You know what I'm saying? And we can keep moving. You know what I mean? Like that's
full
we live
forgiveness.
in a world of shades of gray.
Yes, and forgiveness. Part of it is then moving fully past it. Right? That is the point of forgiveness for me, is to be like, okay, now I'm done with that. And this can all wrap around to storytelling, by the way, which is that I did a whole piece last year about national trauma and collective trauma, and it's a real thing. And I talked to some therapists and neuroscientists, and the accepted I'll send it to you. The accepted, highest standard of therapeutic care for trauma. And this actually applies to any modality, whether it's hallucinogenic, like ketamine therapy, EMDR, talk therapy, whatever, is storytelling. At the bottom of all trauma therapy is retelling the story that you've been telling yourself. And to lean that story towards agency and kindness and forgiveness, but ultimately action. Ultimately, because what trauma does more than anything else is paralyze, is keep you stuck.
And there's a political link to that. You know what I mean? Because this ongoing barrage of bigotry and hatred is designed to stun us. You know what I mean? To stun us into feeling powerless. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's this giant wave that we can't stop. So finding any way to do something is fantastic. I will also say my friend R.O. Kwan, who I did a lot of Get Out the Vote stuff, she's an amazing novelist, said years ago, or the last couple of cycles, I remember R.O. Kwan saying that that nothing was better for mental health than actually doing something. If you're really, really stressed about the election, you will feel better if you download 20 letters, form letters from Vote Forward, and write 20 letters to voters. You'll just feel better. It's the mental health equivalent of like taking a walk. You know what I mean? Like it actually, it's kind of annoying how effective that sometimes is. You know what I mean? It actually works.
And I've been doing that. And I want to remind people that with Vote Forward, it may sound intimidating, write a letter. Like what it is a form that has at the top of it, dear whoever, and you handwrite whoever, you handwrite their first name. And then there's a few lines that says you have an opportunity to participate in the election, electing both your, local and national representatives. You can find it more here. It has a link. And then it says, I vote because, and there's a space where for like 3 sentences, maybe at the most. And you write 3 sentences I have a list on my computer of like 25 different things so that I just choose,
Keep it lively.
keep it lively, but also limited. So I'm not like stuck every time about what I say. One I go to a lot, I'm going to say, especially if it's a male name, is I vote to hold politicians accountable, and I vote to have a say in how my tax dollars are spent. So it's really easy. And then at the bottom, you sign your name, and then you do hand address the envelopes. And Greg, you'll appreciate this. There is a Dungeons and Dragons series of stamps out. Did you know this?
That's pretty good. I did not know this. I knew I do have the Star Wars stamps, but I did not know about the Dungeons and Dragons stamps.
So all of my letters going out right now, all of my GOTV letters have Dungeons and Dragons stamps. I could keep bringing this around. I really can. Like, I was on a mutual aid call last night, and they went through like stuff I actually probably can't say out loud because it was real specific. But at the end of it, and actually just not the end, throughout it, the organizer kept saying, and take care of yourself, and don't do this full time. And part of your work is to connect. And part of your work is she actually talked about inner child work and shadow work. And at the end of it, she said, and you know what I do a lot? I watch a lot of superhero movies. I didn't plan that. That is literally what she said.
That's really funny. I mean, I think people talk a lot about burnout in activist circles, and it is incredibly real, because folks are getting paid, and also whenever you decide you're going to speak out, and a particular, you're going to have pushback, you know what I mean? And that's, if you've grown up as a lawful good people pleaser, I don't know if there's anybody like that here, but if you've grown up that way, it's not always fun to have, people critiquing you. And, like you might get, I mean, particularly like people who you might agree with politically, you know what I'm saying? So having, and also, like, if you get involved with a mutual aid group, which I highly encourage, you also, that's suddenly you're in meetings and you're dealing with interpersonal issues and all of this kind of stuff. And folks in mutual aid talk all the time about people enormously burning out. It's not easy. There's so pacing yourself. I mean,
right now, let me just throw it out there. Pace, but also we have 12 days.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the way I think about it is, I mean, Miriam Kaba, who goes by Prison Culture Online, an incredible abolitionist and advocate for many wonderful things, talks about picking your lane. You know what I mean? Like, pick your lane, pick the area in which you feel like you've got a connection or maybe some kind of experience, expertise, and just, do what you can in your lane, and trust that other people are going to be doing what they can in their own lane. If you're a person who is deathly afraid of phones, don't worry about phone banking. You don't have to do that. Don't feel guilty about it. Do something else. Write some letters. You know what I mean? Or text bank, or share material. If you're somebody who has a specific skill. Okay, well, this is a seg. I got a bunch of comics friends who organized a thing called Stop Project 2025, the Stop Project 2025 comic. And if you go to stopproject2025comic.org, you can see a whole bunch of short comic book stories about all of the different ways that Project 2025 would destroy our country in various ways, would ruin our lives. And those are, so folks who have specific skills use those skills to try to help communicate this. And now those are resources that you can share. Even just like sharing stuff like that, with folks that you think would be influenced by it. Like that could be your lane, but whatever it is, maybe your lane in this case is to maybe you've got maybe you got money, maybe you're throwing money at pizza to the polls, or to candidates you care about. Maybe you are so angry at the Democrats you don't want to give the Democrats any money or direct support, but you want Trump to lose. There are tons of grassroots groups, progressive grassroots groups, that are working to get out the vote without directly working for the Harris campaign. And if you support them, you're supporting progressives who are going to be fighting centrist Democrats later down the line about issues you care about, but who are going to also help keep Trump out of office right now. So there's lots of different ways that we can find our lane and do stuff in our lane. Those are just a few of them.
I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who's active in Democratic politics, like Democrat. She's a Democrat. And she's not feeling great. She's also a Swiftie. She's also a Swiftie. And she told me that she got on a call, I think it was day before yesterday, Swifties for Harris. And there were 1,200 people on that call. Zoom, I say call, whatever, Zoom. And it's completely independent of the Harris campaign. She knows the Harris campaign. She's involved with that. And this was just like people emailing each other. It's actually mutual aid on some level, right? She also mentioned to me something I didn't know, people should know, which is the survivors for Harris that did the full page ad in the New York Times, organized independently of the Harris campaign.
Yeah. I mean, I'm raising money, trying to help raise money for Asian Americans for Democracy, which is a group independent of the Harris campaign that is raising money for grassroots AA and HPI groups in swing states, in critical swing states, to help get out the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander vote. And again, that's not directly putting money into the hands of the Harris campaign. It's going to grassroots groups that know their communities to get out the vote. So that feels really good on many levels, because also, even if I didn't have, I've got big issues with, I think the Democrats have failed us on Gaza and have failed us on immigration, failed us on trans rights. There are so many more things that they should be doing and saying and proactively fighting for that they are not. And I'm not convinced that they are going to be fantastic when they get into office on these issues either. But they're going to be vastly better than Republicans. And by strengthening grassroots groups that are going to fight them on those issues and push them on those issues, maybe that's the more charitable way to put it, we're in better shape than if we just give that money directly to the Harris campaign. So that's on the issues front. That's why I do this. Also, if all you care about is pure practical politics of winning this race, it's really worthwhile tossing money at both these grassroots groups and local politicians and local campaigns that you care about, because local folks very often know their communities better than the national campaign, and they're going to be able to get out specific voters in a way that the national campaign may or may not. So you're hedging your bets in a really good way, in a really cost-effective way, if you want to toss your money to local candidates that you care about and local community groups.
The other thing that I think is really important about the local groups, and then also these, we could call them special interest groups, Swifties, survivors.
Yeah.
And this is the thing I reminded my friend of, and I believe it was helpful for her, and it's helpful for me to remember, is that those groups self-organizing right now are going to continue to exist no matter who wins, right? This is
always the hope, right? This is, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But Move On came about years ago in reaction to the impeachment campaign against Clinton, and then that, it endured past that. There are ways in which groups will, then. I mean, this is also my argument about the giving giving money to these grassroots
Yeah.
Asian American groups because they're going to be around. Like those were the groups I was volunteering for one of those groups in Georgia, back 4 years ago, and they were working hard back then. They're going to be working hard, in the future. And these are also groups that are going to do things like, in the height of the pandemic, they're the ones who are going to. Sometimes these groups are the groups that are organizing, free lunches for seniors in Chinatowns and all that kind of. You know what I mean? Like these are groups that are doing good things all the time,
Right.
and not just for one politician. I mean, this is another thing that I always try to emphasize is that no politician. I try not to valorize politicians. I try not to think of politicians as heroes. I think it's that's fine if that's going to get you to vote. If you want to think of them as heroes, go for it. But long term, they will all disappoint us, and they all have disappointed us. And our job, the way I see it, and also if we attach, if we treat politicians like, I don't know, like fictional heroes, we expect them to be morally perfect. No, I mean, anybody running for office is a little, there's something going on there that's not exactly normal. You know what I mean? Like, and by nature, their job is to compromise and so they're always going to be, all of them are going to have made compromises that any one of us will find disgusting. But our job is to pick smarter people than me have said this many times, and I'm stealing from them. But our job is to pick our opponent. And I would vastly prefer having even the most milquetoast centrist Dem as my opponent than Trump. And because we have a chance of pushing. Biden has been a miserable failure on multiple fronts, but he's also been influenceable on others, and he also he's been fantastic on certain fronts. Like he's the best climate change, he's the best labor president we may have ever had. He's a massive failure in terms of Gaza, and he hasn't fought back on. Like all these Democrats, he hasn't fought back on this massive onslaught of bigoted anti-immigrant sentiment we've had for years now. But he still is an easier person to push than a hard right Republican, and therefore that's who I would rather have that person there. You know what I mean? But if I put all of my energy into thinking of him as a hero, or thinking of Harrison Waltz, even Waltz, who I like so much, you know what I mean? If I put all my energy into thinking of him as a hero, when he screws up, am I going to get disappointed and drop out? No, I'm going to keep pushing because I want him in there so I can bully him. So because I could bully him better than I could bully Vance. Anyway.
And I really need to make very clear, when I talk about the importance of the hero courage narrative, I am not talking about looking at politicians as the heroes. I am talking about being heroic yourself. I am talking about taking on the role of continuing the fight, even if you don't know if you're going to win.
Yeah, no, there's there are my favorite, a lot of my favorite stories and movies have characters who are absolutely terrified. You know what I mean? Who are unsure, who are in a world that is full of shades of gray, where it's not necessarily even entirely clear what the right thing is to do, but they are going to, and also that or if the right thing is clear, that the forces against them are just overwhelming, and it's just terrifying. But they pull it together and they do something regardless of that terror. They even accept that terror and do it anyway. You know what I mean? Like it's okay. It's okay to be scared because these are scary times. But when we do stuff, particularly when we do it with each other, this is also why, I don't know, like all these, so many of these stories that are so compelling to me are found families. You know what I mean? It's like these groups of disparate people who come together, and sometimes with very different motivations. You know what I mean? So, and that's why we love Han Solo, because he's the rogue who doesn't care about everything, but then of course he cares in the end. You know what I mean? Like, but that kind of, accepting that we are working together in a coalition. No one of us can do it alone. We rely on each other. We've each got our own abilities and skills, and we're gonna do our best. What else can we do but do our best? Like those stories can be heartening, and I think it's entirely human and good to take inspiration from those.
I was gonna say, in summary, be Han.
Oh man.
So if we're going to start to wrap up, I mean, the story is never over, but is there anything you want to add?
I mean, just we're I think our culture, there's a lot of forces in our culture that encourage a feeling of helplessness. You know what I mean? And a feeling of just like sit back and consume. You know what I mean? And that's not just politics. That's I mean, politics is part of everything, but that's also, our just our culture in general is. I could rant forever about AI and all of these other things, but it is a dehumanizing culture that is pushing us to discount our innate humanness. You know what I mean? And I think anything that lets us embrace ourselves as flawed people who actually are still pretty awesome and can do things is fantastic. There's a movie called Little Big Man from back in the day, Arthur Penn movie with Dustin Hoffman and Chief Dan George. Chief Dan George is just phenomenal in that movie, and there's a line that has always stuck with me where he talks about he's an old man in the movie, and he talks about calling for the power to make things happen. That when he was a young man, he had the power to make things happen. And just that phrasing always really stuck with me. Like, all of us have the power to make things happen, actually, no matter how powerless, the billionaires and politicians of the world want us to feel, we can actually make things happen. Like you can, you may have, if you have a few friends, you can put together a little letter writing party, and you could write a few dozen letters and send those few dozen letters to a swing state. And because of that, there's a chance that, yes, you could have led to somebody being elected who wouldn't have been elected otherwise. It seems almost like fantasy, but it's real. Every day, elections are decided by fewer than 100 votes. Sometimes national elections, almost always, there are local elections, that are incredibly close. And not even talking about elections, if you get involved in in your local mutual aid group and you drop off masks and somebody uses a mask, you may never know it, but you probably saved a life somewhere down the line. You know what I'm saying? Like you dropped off some masks during the pandemic. Somebody who would never have been able to get those masks used them, avoided getting COVID once, and as a result, their grandmother didn't die. You know what I'm saying? Like there are actually real ways in which the little things we do can have a big effect. So we are all people who can make things happen. That would be yes. And we got 12 days left to do it in this particular election cycle.
That is a great note to end on. This is 90 Days with Ana Marie Cox. There are 12 days until the election. Early voting has started at a lot of places. Bank that vote early, avoid lines. People will stop calling you and harassing you. You can then start harassing other people if you so choose. I'm not a text or call person. I'm a letter writing person, but I'll figure out something else to do after that. This is a YouTube show and also a podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you could also, in fact, please do both if you're a fan of this show. Subscribe, rate, review on both YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We, like the election, will probably be continuing after, not probably, we will be continuing after Election Day. I hope for not that long. Like that's or we'll move on to doing something slightly different. Again, thank you, Greg Pak, for being here. You have a website. You also are part of the project2025comics.com.
Yep.
Okay.
Stop Project 2025.
Stop Project 2025.
.org. Yes. And yeah, honestly, if you want to find me, and if you want to like join in on some of this stuff that I'm trying to do, follow me on Blue Sky. It's easy to find me. Just Greg Pak, GregPak on Blue Sky. You'll find me easily if you just put that in your little search bar there. And also my the website where I write about political stuff is gregpak.net.
Thank you so much.
It's a core meltdown, sir. It can't be stopped.
Surrender may be our only option.
No! Never give up. Never surrender.
Orders, sir? Sir, your orders!
Activate the Omega-13.